Welcome back. Today I get to talk about one of my favorite people in the entire universe, Brother Bhimalananda, and I want to tell you about the hourglass technique that he taught me for seeing the spiritual eye. It was such a peculiar thing. It really came from him. It didn't come from anywhere else. And along with other things that I teach, it can give us a better view of how to see the spiritual light. So let's get into it. So I was working for the church. I was working at Mount Washington, and I was sweeping away, and all of a sudden we had this little old man who seemed so magical come along, and he would start helping me sweep up my area. And I pronomed to him, I introduced myself, I spoke with him a little bit, and I just absolutely fell in love with this little old man who was, for the most part, sidelined by everybody else. He was almost completely ignored. He was very much ignored, and this is a theme which is kind of run through my life, where I meet these wonderful old souls who have mostly been sidelined or ignored most of their lives, and I find all this treasure inside of them. And that was true for Ashokji, that was true for Bhimalanandaji, that was true for my grandfather, and many others. So it's a real joy to be able to tell you about him and his story, his technique. They had brought him for his retirement to Mount Washington. They didn't really know what to do with him, and so they would put him in a room and have him watch movies. And well, he got bored with that very, very quickly. And so he just decided to figure out for himself what to do. And he went out and he got a broom and he got a dustbin and he got some, we used to call them brutes, these trash cans, these plastic trash cans. And he would go up and down the driveway and clean up the leaves, and up and down the road and clean up the leaves. And there was always something to sweep. And he just kept himself busy and in service constantly. And I don't know, I could see this magic inside of him. I could see this spirit, this Holy Spirit inside of him. And I kept plying him with questions. And it was for sure that he knew what he was doing. And that nobody else could really understand what was going on with him. It was very funny. So he would go into a long meditation, and he would be sitting in his chair, and all of a sudden you'd come to the end of the meditation and you'd see him sitting in a chair like I'm sitting right now, and he would be like this, and worse, he would be way over to the side in this impossible position to maintain. And I remember watching the monks circle around him and just stare and chuckle at the oddness of the position that he was in. Nobody bothered him. They were very respectful. They could see that he was in an altered state, and they because of his seniority, they did not bother him, right? So they were respectful, thank God. But he was in a freeze response, you see? He was in a freeze response, and his body had drifted over to the side. And the freeze was so powerful that he didn't break it. He just let it go, and he probably didn't even realize his body was at this odd angle. He'd been doing this for years, right? He'd been sitting in a chair, meditating this way for years, and his body would go into the freeze, and he'd end up almost parallel. There were a few times I saw him, and it was impossible, just this impossible meditative posture. And it was supported by the freeze, because the freeze comes onto you so powerfully that the body numbs from your awareness. The freeze becomes like a hibernation. That's the force that it's giving you in meditation. Body asleep, mind awake. That's meditation. That's what we're doing. As we enter into the freeze, that's where we're going. And he was doing that. You could see it in his meditations. And so I would just ply him with questions now and then. And I asked him about seeing the spiritual eye because in that organization, seeing the spiritual eye was a very big deal, and I really wanted to see it more and better. And I asked him about it, and he told me when you're looking at the spiritual eye, you kind of have to look through it. You have to look past it, right? And so this is the hourglass technique. He would say, your two eyes are going this way, right? You're looking here, so you look up very gently towards the spiritual eye. I'm looking right here, right? That's your two physical eyes. But then you imagine you're looking past it, and your eyesight's actually opening up. And together that forms an hourglass, right? So I called this the hourglass technique, and I wrote about it in Hacking the Universe, my first book. Now you don't have to read that book. You can if you want that little tidbit, but the new book is much, much, much more important. But that's in there. In that first book, Hacking the Universe, the hourglass technique. So our physical eyes go like this, but our perception goes like this. So you're kind of going like this. That's a little bit confusing, isn't it? So this is how I explain it. After having years to explore and figure these things out, I have a much better way to explain this, I believe, which I'm sure Brother Bimalananda would love, and that is do hakala. So you look at one point, and you open up your peripheral vision. You try to make sure you can see all of your fingers simultaneously, right? Doesn't have to be crystal clear, but you have to be aware of everything going on in your periphery. And as you do that, your eyes will dilate. And that's the opening of the hourglass. So I'm looking here physically, but my perception is opening up. I'm dilating my eyes by going into hakala. So how do you do that in meditation? Well, you sit and you do your HRV resonance, you sit very still, you notice some of the proofs, and then if you want to see the spiritual eye, you want to work on this little project, all right? It's like a spiritual side hustle, right? My spiritual side hustle for the spiritual eye. I want to work on that today, and so in my spiritual side hustle, I'm going to open my eyes, go into hakala. I don't have to put my hands up. I'm just going to notice that. That's just to get used to it, right? Okay, now I'm used to this idea. I'm opening up this portion of my vision, and I'm going to open my eyes in meditation and just see everything. Take everything in. I don't have to move. I'm just going to open my eyes. I keep that attitude. I close my eyes, and I just embrace everything. I open my eyes. I check. Is it still there? Am I still seeing everything? Do I still have the same attitude? Then I close my eyes. Same thing. Embrace everything. And you go back and forth until you feel like I can close my eyes and I can still feel that attitude of embracing everything. That's what you want. And what happens to a yogi when they're sitting in a cave, let's say, or they're sitting in a very dark room, is all of this happens naturally, automatically, over time. But we're speeding it up, and we're learning to do it on demand. I want to do that now. This is my spiritual side hustle for the spiritual eye. I'm going to do it right now. Open my eyes, go into hakala, make sure my peripheral vision is open. That embracing everything feeling is here, and then I close my eyes, and I make sure I can still feel it. And that's what you want. That's what you want. It's beautiful. And out of that will come this ability to see the spiritual eye. Todd Murphy has written in his books How to See the Spiritual Eye, and he gives a very interesting exercise. And it's the same thing. So you've got the hourglass, it's 1, 2. You've got hakala, right? It's 1, 2, right? And Todd Murphy is giving 2 instructions as well. He says, if I remember correctly, he says, okay, put your physical eyes to look at your nose, but put your feeling, put your intention to look through the spiritual eye up here. So physically here, intention up here. And so you're splitting. And he says, this is what you're trying to do. You're trying to split your vision from your intention. So you have an intuitive perception that you're developing by looking here, feeling here, and you have a physical intention of looking at your nose, and you're splitting those two. You're learning how to do that. And that's a riddle, right? That's a little hard for some people to grasp. And this is why the South Indians have this beautiful riddle. They say, look, but don't look. What? Look, but don't look. I don't know what that means, right? That's right. It's a riddle. It's something you have to investigate over time. We're learning to split. We're learning to go this way and this way at the same time. We're learning to close our eyes and expand at the same time. But really what it's asking you to do is embrace the all. Let go of the fixation and embrace the all. That's the answer to the riddle. Now, I've said this before, yogis very often need confirmation to know they're seeing the spiritual eye. And it just happened this morning. I'm talking to a wonderful yogi, and you know who you are. And we were talking about the spiritual eye, and he goes, well, I'm not really seeing it. I'm not really seeing it. And then we keep talking. And he says, well, I saw something like this. And I said, that's the spiritual eye. And he goes, oh. And so he needed that confirmation. He goes, yeah, I guess I have. I have been seeing that on a regular basis, but I was discounting it. And so it's very much like a process of Plato's cave. So Plato tells this story. So there was a group of men, and they were at the back of the cave, and they'd all lost the ability to see the light, right? So they're all in the dark, right? And one man drums up this courage, and he starts walking out of the cave. And at first, his eyes hurt to see the light after all that time. And then it goes away, and he realizes how brilliant, how much of the world he's been missing out on. But at first it was uncomfortable. But as he keeps going into the light, of course, everything gets easier, everything gets brighter, everything gets more beautiful. And so he's walking towards that light, and he calls back to his friends and says, you've got to come out here. It's amazing. And they don't believe him. They say, no, we have to stay back here. You're crazy. Whatever you're doing, this is wrong. You're going the wrong way. You have to stay in the dark. And he says, no, there's light out here. You've got to, no, you're going towards pain. That's wrong. That is wrong. You're going the wrong way. We know this already, right? And he can't get them to come into the light. And that's kind of the feeling that I get from yogis when they start to see the light, is that they don't quite believe this is actually happening to them. But with a little time and a little more confirmation and a little more confirmation, you start to realize, I am seeing the light. And it will come in all different shapes or forms, right? I've said that before. It can be a dark circle. It can be a blue circle. It can be a blue blob. It can be a purple blob. It can be a white circle. It can be a gold circle. It can be half of that circle. It can be like a crescent moon, a white crescent moon or a gold crescent moon. Or it can be down here. It can be up here. It might be one pinprick of light. It might be several rays of light. It might be several rays of light this way. It can be just a deepening darkness on one side or a deepening darkness on another side, like looking into a cave. All of those are correct. And when you see the full-blown spiritual eye, when it really crystallizes, then you might see a golden circle surrounding a bluish, purplish hue in the center, this beautiful blue cave, and in the center of that cave will be a white star. Very, very beautiful. But it does not have to crystallize that completely to be called the spiritual eye. That's a really wonderful experience when it crystallizes so completely. But it's not necessary that you have to see all of that to go into deep meditation. That's not what deep meditation is all about. It's a byproduct. It's something that might happen along the way as you're going deep in meditation. It's the depth, the feeling, the expansion, and the bliss, which is the most important, not the spiritual eye. The spiritual eye is the cookie. It's the ice cream. It's the icing on the cake along the way. It's possibly your spiritual side hustle. So I hope that you love this. I hope it helps you in your meditations. If it does, be sure to hit that bell down below so I can see all